Hey, how y'all doing? This is Rob at Z Paints. I know a lot of y'all are doing plastic dipping and using either the Graco or the Earl-Tex sprayers. Now I've not seen the Earl-Tex, but from what I've heard, they use the same gun. So we've all cleaned our guns, taken all the nozzles and everything out of it, and cleaned it up after we're done dipping. But one thing not many of us have done, or a few of us have, and I know always the first time of doing anything it's a little scary, is actually disassembling the entire gun. So just to help y'all get some of the fear out of it, I'm going to take my gun apart, and through the magic of television, bam, all the screws are out of it. Anyways, there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 Phillips screws. Nothing fancy about them, just a little Phillips screwdriver will pull them suckers out. And if you look, the thing is actually split right down the center. That'll just lift off. Okay? The workings of the gun itself, the main body, is actually just one piece. It'll lift up out of here. Before I do that, let's talk a little bit about the mysterious clicker and adjuster we've got in the back here. We all know that if you bring it all the way down, that you can't squeeze the handle very far. It doesn't spray a lot of material. Well, the way that works, there's just a little piece of plastic in the center of the handle, and it rides right in the center of this wheel. Notice the little groove around it. One section of it, or one end of it, is got a real shallow, and as it goes on around it gets deeper and deeper. And what that's allowing that little trigger to do is initially you've screwed all the way down, it just barely slides in there. But as you turn around, it can go deeper and deeper, and the further it can go in, the more you can squeeze that handle. So whatever you do when you put this thing back together, make sure that little tab is lined up in the center of this wheel. Otherwise you're either not going to spray at all, or you're going to spray a lot of material every time. Anyways, to get this out of here, it's now pretty much just setting in there. There is this one little post it's setting on, so just slide it right off that post. You can see the post here, and that gives you the whole body. Now the way this is all assembled is the normal needle here that we normally pull out with the little snazzy tool. It screws into a little brass piece right about here somewhere, and that's got a spring in it. Well, what's keeping all that together is the handle. There's a little plastic tab in there that interlocks with that piece of brass. The top of the handle is just snapped in two little holes here. So we'll pull them loose, and that lets that come right on loose. Now, depending how dirty or clean or lubricated your gun is, this is all spring loaded. It will depend how easy that thing slides out, or sometimes it'll just pop out on its own. Now, I've had this apart 2 or 3 times in thinking about getting ready for this video. Actually filmed it once with the camera upside down, so that didn't work a whole lot. But this is what it looks like when it comes out. Again, right here in the center, this is where your needle is screwing in. That's the way it sets inside here. When you squeeze the trigger, it's pulling this needle back and loading up that spring. So anyways, pull this all apart, clean all these pieces. You don't need to take any of this piece of rubber off here, just clean them up. Don't leave them set in your thinner, your cleaner, whatever you happen to be using. These are just rubber and plastic. Since the thinner we use dissolves plastic dip, I would assume that it's not going to do the greatest good on leaving these rubber and plastic pieces soaking in it. Now once you've got this all apart, right here is where your air hose plugs in. Now it's blowing air down, coming in, and it's coming out around the outside. Then when you squeeze the trigger, it's pulling this needle back and allowing the air that's coming in this center channel to bring dip with it and spray it out. That dip's coming up through here, which is where your pickup tube is. This is actually pressurized and bringing air down from this assembly to pressurize this tank and help push that dip up in there. It works a little bit off the suction, but it also pressurizes this tank to an extent. One way to prove that, if you don't believe me, don't tighten this thing up one time. Tip it a little bit at an angle, and then all of a sudden it'll start just spraying dip out. Well, that's because it's under pressure. It's not just running out on its own. Don't ask me how I know that. Anyways, I've got a little cleaning brush here, and what I'll do is I'll just dip it in a little bit of cleaner, and then I'll just run up in all these holes. Get them all cleaned out real well. Okay, all the way down in case there's any dip or product stuck up in those suckers. Then once that's all done, wipe them out, get them good and clean. Then I'll take an air hose and I'll blow air through all these channels. Make sure that those openings are not plugged up. They're getting the good airflow you want. That way it gives us a good pattern, gives us good flow on dip. Now to put this assembly back together, put your needle in this little brass insert in the back. I don't know, it's probably got some fancy name. I'll call it the brass thing. Now normally I would put a drop of oil on this little washer back here. Then I would do the same thing on this one. But in the process of making this little video here, I've misplaced my oil. So put a little something on it so that way it slides back. You don't want to glob it in, just one drip, and then kind of wash it around. I'll take it back apart here in a little bit to get it put together where it's supposed to go. Slide your spring on it. Put it in the center. Now before we do that, see that little hole right there? That's what that trigger is going to hook into. Use your little disassembly tool. Slide it on, and that'll let you push this thing all the way back in here, because you've got to push it in quite a ways to get that trigger. And holding that little assembly tool is a lot easier than trying to get your finger up there and hold the point of that little needle that's coming out. Now this little plastic tip right here is what's going to go in this slot. These two little hooks, one here and one on this side. Always put the smooth part towards your container. And there you go. That's all it takes. Now if I squeeze this, and it's it's moving, but I can feel it's a little stiff. I'll take it back part here in a bit, put a drop of oil in there and get it loosened up for me. Put it back together. Sorry, I'm working upside down on y'all now. Again, this little piece here goes up in that hole. Just set it down in. Make sure your trigger, that little center tit, goes in the middle of your adjuster here. If it's on the side, not sitting there well, you're either going to be spraying full dip all the time or no dip anytime. Take your last piece, get it snapped on, put your screws back in, reassemble the front, and you're all set. Anyways, hopefully when you get ready to take your gun apart and get it cleaned up, it's not quite so scary for you now that you've seen it apart. It's really pretty simple. Or if you need to rebuild it, there are rebuild kits online. It comes with all the center nozzles and stuff. Anyways, this is Rob at zpaints.com. Hope y'all learned something on this. If not, hey, leave me a message. And y'all have a great day. Thanks.